Hi, this is Roger Green, host of the Surfing the Mesh Tsunami podcast. This week, we were offering 5 conversations from episode 18. Our discussion with Society for Sober Livers founder and visionary Jenn Jones and principal strategic advisor Beth Lehman, talking about HOPE, their new support program for people who have harmed their bodies through alcohol use disorder, or AUD, either active, which means still consuming alcohol, or in remission, which means sober, at least at this time. By the way, HOPE stands for Healing Others with Peers and Education. This conversation focuses on sober livers' plans and hopes for the future. I begin this conversation by sharing a story based on my own experience with cancer about the pressure caregivers struggle with, and I ask how HOPE will address caregivers and their needs. Beth acknowledges that this need is legitimate, and that sober livers wrestled with this issue when considering their original offering. In the end, they decided the organization needed to meet the needs of individuals living in the situation before offering services to caregivers. So there are no such services in 1.0. To Jenn, the reason not to include caregivers in the initial group population is that having caregivers in the group might limit the items and issues that the core constituency, the patients, will discuss comfortably. She says that creating a parallel caregiver program will be a pivotal next step once the target group is up and running. Next, I ask what else sober livers would like to implement over time to enhance the program. Jenn notes that the organization plans to create benchmarks and conduct qualitative and quantitative research to be certain that, and I quote, "this is an effective community that's actually helping people," end of quote. They will share this data and the resulting strategic plan with hopes of WAC, what they describe as their whole health advisory council, healthcare professionals, and prospective sponsors, including one pharma company that has already committed the starter grant to the program. In practical terms, Jenn mentioned starting a second meeting at a time of day more suitable to West Coast residents with jobs, recruiting transplant centers to share their information so that appropriate patients will enroll, and even make initial contact during first hospitalization. They would like to educate the people living with disease on options they might not have considered and scientific advances, such as liver perfusion and finding a living donor. And finally, Beth mentions they would like in-person meetings in major cities someday. HOPE is an admirable and ambitious effort to provide support that does not otherwise exist today for people who need it badly. Personal stories that Jenn and Beth share are compelling, and their plans and goals invigorating. So just sit back, listen, learn, absorb. When you're done, check out our LinkedIn discussion group and check out and perhaps contribute to soberlivers.org to support HOPE. Boy, I have a lot of questions. So here's the first one. Time flies when you're having fun. 14 years ago, I was diagnosed with adjuvant melanoma. It was never on my skin, but they found it in a lymph node. And they took that out, and then there was a recurrence, and then obviously I'm fine, 13 years clean. But during the first year of that, I went to various support groups that I found. And what struck me is that frequently the support group was not the person with the disease, but a spouse or partner. In fact, the second email that this podcast ever got was from a woman who thought her brother had ALD, although it wasn't called ALD. And how do you tell, and what do you do to get him to stop drinking? So I'm sure that the community that wants to know how to support, either bring a family member to look in the mirror, or to support them as they're deciding to not just look in the mirror, but walk the path. Do you have ways to support those people in the system?
Beth Lehman.
Yeah, Roger, that's a good point. When I speak, there's people coming up to me at the end, and everybody has a brother, a sister, a friend, an aunt, an uncle, or somebody like that they're worried about, right? That's one area where sober livers, I think, has the potential to grow, because like we're having a meeting for people with ALD right now. This is our first meeting, but you bring up a good point. What about the caregivers? Because each one of those people more than likely has a caregiver. So we do want to move into a caregiver group meeting as well. You know, my husband has kind of dipped and delved into a couple of caregiver meetings that are out there, and he has brought up some really good points. And I do think that that's a need out there. If anything, it starts the conversation. Somebody admitting it is the first step, right? That's what they say. But I think the conversation is to be started. And that's exactly where Sober Livers wants to take this. Jenn, fill in.
Jenn Jones.
I agree with Beth. It was a very hard decision for us to make as to how we wanted to start and if we wanted care partners to be part of the meeting itself. The reason we're separating it right now is because there's some things that people want to say in front of other people that have their same condition that they may not feel comfortable having their care partner here, and vice versa. You know, care partners are going through a lot, but they don't necessarily want the loved one in their life to know how they're feeling necessarily all the time. So care partners, having a care partner program will be a vital next step for our organization. And we're looking forward to finding the right people to lead those types of groups. So yeah, it's of utmost important. I mean, I know my significant other, he takes off of work every time I need an endoscopy. And he hasn't had to support me like a transplant patient has to be supported, but I go to doctors all the time, and he's always watching out for hepatic encephalopathy, which is when you get ammonia in your brain. Most of your listeners will know what this is, HE. So he's always on the lookout for me to sound like, basically like looking like I may be drunk, but knowing I haven't drank a sip of anything. And so, yeah, it's a hard job. It's not easy. And we want to give them tools as well.
That's stage 2, huh?
Stage 2, yeah. Mm-hmm. Sober Livers 2.0.
So what else do you see down the road for Sober Livers? How do you see it rolling out? And what day will you say, click, we hit goal 1? And what day will you go, wow, we're really out there? What'll tell you that?
One thing that is very important to me, and I know a couple members on our WAC also have asked this question, but what about in-person meetings? My dream is for Sober Livers to go viral, that people like what we're doing, that we will get more people. I want more people than we can handle, so to speak. When you find that you have a certain amount of people in a certain location, and my guess, if I had to guess, it would be congregated in cities that probably have bigger transplant centers or things like that. I don't know, but I think maybe one day we could start doing in-person meetings. The concepts and all of this stuff kind of happened when COVID was still being talked about, right? But now that we're out of COVID, I think that could be, as well as, and Jen, I'll let you talk about this more, but the separation into different groups as well, like men and women, things like that.
Yeah, and I think I talked a little bit about that, but when you were talking about like, when would we consider what we're doing a success? One of the things we're going to do is we're going to do some surveying, and we're going to benchmark, and we'll do some qualitative and quantitative work so that we can see that this is an effective community that's actually helping people. That's important to both and when Beth says WAC, that stands for Whole Health Advisory Council. They're our WAC. I love the name. So we want to be able to provide data and information back to them. Although I cannot say the pharmaceutical company or the grant amount yet, I would let you know that we have received our verbal agreement for our first grant with a pharmaceutical company, which is absolutely phenomenal. And we're so excited, and we need those grants to sustain us. They also want to see how we're going to sustain ourselves. And that's by showing our strategic plan and how we want to grow with these types of different meetings, meeting times, because as you know, we're a national organization. And so finding meeting times that work for everyone is a little bit difficult. Right now, we are starting with 7 p.m. Eastern time, which means that we're going to have a lot of people at 4 o'clock over on the Pacific Coast time where they may not be out of work yet. So we're going to anticipate that our growth may look interesting at first because maybe we're not getting enough people. And if we change that time around and offer a second meeting, we may see more people who want to participate. And we'd also like to have the transplant centers, when people are in the hospital, handing them the phone saying, here's a really great group to join and you can get on right now, because they can share some really good stories and really good journeys and make somebody feel like they're not alone. I know when I was in the hospital for the first 10 days in the hospital and then 10 days in the physical rehabilitation center because I couldn't walk any longer and I had to use a walker to walk because my ascites and my stomach, my legs were so swollen. Letting people know that they're not alone in that, because you feel so alone. So if we can benchmark and really see that part of it is a success, I think that's what that would look like, for at least for me. And I think it would help other people, including trying to get donations to help our program as well, which is so important right now.
And education for anybody that's on a liver transplant path. We're concerned with those patients that have gotten there via alcohol, but there's people that are there through fatty liver, through all kinds of different paths, right? And the transplant path is an important one. And, we really want to focus on education and new things in the liver community. There's liver perfusion now where, you can recover a liver in the evening before and tell the recipient, hey, be at the hospital at 9 a.m. You can start to schedule these transplants out, and then living liver donations. That is huge. And if we can educate our members on how they could go about potentially finding a living donor, that's another resource added to the list, and just so much innovation there.
And now back to Roger.
hope you've enjoyed this recording. If you have any questions or comments about the content of this conversation or the entire episode, please put them in the review section of the page from which you downloaded this conversation, or send an email to questions@surfingmash.com. Over this week, we will be posting a series of one-on-one conversations I had with some of our friends over the course of the Easel Congress, and then a wrap-up with Jorn, Louise, and me later in the week. We will have other Easel conversations throughout the month. Until then, stay safe, surf on. We'll see you on the podcast. Bye-bye now.